Normally, when you have very few things to do, I think they're all equally important. So I try not to prioritize them because without doing all two or three things, I will not be able to be successful with the project.
I believe that is the essential ingredient for getting people to have accountability.
The problem at that time is it's very hard to say no to people because they fall in love with each other. In our company, I get to go for dinner with the other side.
How can you avoid that micromanagement trap where you need the quality of work, you can't quite count on your team to do it, and yet you end up micromanaging even when you don't intend to?
When I talk about avoiding micromanage, meaning we don't watching their work, but you're watching these other.
There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. The watchword for today, and I think for the next many months, is impact. So in a jam schedule with extensive demands, how are you going to make sure that you have the right kind of impact and in the right places? And which decisions do you really need to focus on? What can you let your team do? How can you avoid that micromanagement trap? You know, the one where you need the quality of work, you can't quite count on your team to do it, and yet you end up micromanaging even when you don't intend to. And how do you have the right kind of transparency? How much transparency in what ways? All of those are what's going to help you have greater impact. And those are the questions we're addressing today with some proven advice from a business leader who's been there and done that in his own company. So my guest today is Anil Singhal, who co-founded NetScout in June of 1984 and has served as president and CEO since then. Under his leadership, NetScout has grown substantially, completing its initial public offering in 1999 and reached nearly $1 billion in annual revenues following the July in 2015 acquisition of Danaher Communications. So Anil is a published author and has earned lots of notable recognition for his entrepreneurial success. The book we're talking about today is The 5% Rule of Leadership. Anil, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Wanda.
So tell me just a tiny bit about NetScout for people who don't know the company or what you do or how you do it.
So NetScout is a leader in performance management and cybersecurity solutions, and you'll find a lot of companies doing that. We invented a unique technique, which is based on a network vantage point. Most of the solutions in the market mine the intelligence already in the infrastructure. We create our own intelligence, and we have literally 100 plus patents in this. And the big thing is that we also were able to consolidate the market. So I would venture to say 50% of the experts in this field, the way we do it, it's a niche market, are at NetScout. And we are operating in 50 countries and about 2,000 employees.
Sounds pretty good to me. And the revenues sound pretty good. And you're certainly in a hot area for the business. All right. So this notion of the 5% rule, explain what that is and how that works. And just for the record, that's how you run your business. So explain to us how this works.
So I just wanted to mention that I was unconsciously running it like that 20 years ago, and then started running it like that consciously 10 years ago. And now as the company is 40-year-old, as we are looking at succession planning activities, I think we need to even teach some of the leaders at NetScout more consciously, and so they can take the company for the next 30, 40 years. So that was one of the reasons for writing the book. So the word 5% is still an abstract notion, but it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek also. But the number 5% comes from the Pareto principle. So 20% of the decision have 80% of the outcome. Sometimes people say 20% of the salespeople bring 80% of the revenue. And but this is, I call it Pareto of Pareto. Actually, the 80-20 rule can apply again in the 20%. For example, as a startup, 5% of the revenue was coming from a single salesperson. So the point is that you can, if you choose the right decisions, you can have less effort, yet more results. And that's the Pareto principle. So the 5% rule says that if you front load crisp and clear decision making, explaining what and why of what decisions you have made to your team as a leader, then you can more or less be assured of success. And you just spend 5% of your time, and now you can move to other consequential project. And one of the very interesting thing I say is, look at Google Map. Imagine you start driving the moment a thought comes to your mind. Driving is like executing a project, and you'll get stuck in traffic. You'll take left turn, right turn. You'll be stressed out. You probably will never reach on time. And but if you see the Google Map, you're more or less assured of your success, meaning reaching on time, even before you start driving. So that's the five, and it takes less than 5% of that effort. So 5% is roughly 1 to 10% of the project time can be spent by leaders in making decision before a single a single second is spent on execution is called the 5% rule.
Okay. All right. So we have the Pareto principle. 20% of the people effort produces 80% of the results. And so you apply the Pareto principle again to that 20%, and there we get a 5%. So it's the 5%.
Yeah, it gets to 4%, but 5% is more interesting. Marketing.
All right, fine. But in that, and I get the idea, is that you have to focus on the 5% decisions and make it clear to your team what you've decided, how you've decided, why you've decided. So they're up to speed. I get that one. But, of the 100 decisions you could focus on, how do you know which ones are in that 5% principle set?
So first thing is that the 5% rule is applied to consequential, non-repeatable project. If it's repeatable, you did it last year. So when you create a new release of a product, you probably will not apply 5% at my level or leader's level. You may have at the implementation level. But the important thing you are asking is like how do you decide what is important? And one of the interesting thing is I start with deciding what is not important. So, do not do list is longer than the to-do list. Okay. Then if the to-do list is only 3-4 items, it's much easier to prioritize which one is important. And I'll talk about in my book that people say, don't put all your eggs in one basket, okay? That doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you what not to do. So how do you decide how many baskets you pick? And so I said I like to pick the fewest number of baskets, probably two. One main one and one is the backup. So it's much easier. So that's a very hard decision because you love to say, let me try 5 things and hopefully 1 or 2 will work. But deciding which 2 and taking the risk is what happens during that 5%. You have to double down that instead of diluting your effort. It's a self-defeating thing. You try 5 things. You spend money on stock market on 5 stocks. Some go up, some go down. They say, I might as well put my money in money market funds. At least I have a fixed return. So the hard decision during the 5% is what not to do. Then prioritize what is important. Sometimes people say, you're taking a chance and what if you're wrong? And I said, well, I don't mind being wrong 10% of the time because 90% of the time I get this big benefit.
Right. Absolutely. 10%. So 90% of the time it works. All right. Give me an example. Give me an example of a decision you had to make where you decided what is not important. And I want to kind of see your thinking going through that.
Yeah, well, for example, I mean, like in 40 years, I've played every single role in the company. And so there are things on engineering. And like, for example, we decided a long time ago that making hardware by us was less important than using third-party hardware. Okay. And then we later on find out it had other advantages like margins and things like that. And so it's very hard to do when you have hardware expertise in the company. What do you do? So we were able to convert all your hardware engineers to actually software engineer. Later on, we realized software companies have a challenge that they don't have enough appreciation for hardware. Hardware companies have a challenge that they're too much in love with the hardware. Having a software company and engineers who appreciate what kind of hardware to choose is maybe as important as making your own hardware, especially in this day and age. So at different times, we made decisions. I mean, different kind of decisions. Like on business side, we decided that we should have just one classes of stock. Okay, and which is very uncommon at the startup time, and that had an impact on when investors came in. They were forced to do that also. So at a different time, I think we had to make a different decision, and you can call it all the 5% decision, meaning early in the life, instead of taking twists and turns when you're stuck in traffic. And so basically picking the right path with predefined roadblocks is different than escalating during execution, whether it's micromanagement or otherwise, to keep changing the path to remove roadblocks in the path. And it's very uncomfortable when you the Google Map. I don't know whether you know. I know leaving it to a Google Map to define your destiny, how you drive. It's very uncomfortable in the early days of when you have to used to have paper maps.
Yeah, that's right. In the early days, it was a big of a challenge, but it's a lot better today, and then we've gotten used to it. All right, Anil, what about a decision you made in this 5% principle? You doubled down, and it didn't work.
I think there are things I talk about. We are a problem solver, not a solution provider. Okay, and what does that mean? We are providing the solution. Is like we define the problem or redefine the problem before we solve it. So one of the things we looked at was that I believe that we have to make the competitor play your game. So if you want to beat a basketball team, you may have to make them play football. Okay, but in the early days, we I basically didn't follow my own rules, and we bought companies to compete with a big company, and we found that that was a bad idea. And then we learned and we changed um, our strategy, and that led to where we are today.
Okay.
And so sometimes there are things which are not obvious, like I call it death magnet for your business. Identify death magnet, or is going to lead to your death in terms of the business, but it's so attractive you do it. And so identifying this death magnet for your business is important, and that's different for different businesses.
Right. Okay. So we have a list of, so we're looking at decisions that are non-repeatable. So we're not just in the execution mode. We're in the big strategy, big bets, big moves, new initiatives kind of thing. And we're looking for first, what is not important. So we can take all of those. And so that is take your questions and look for what you're not going to do in your questions. Like the statement of don't put your eggs all in one basket is really telling you what not to do, not where to put them. And then try to find as few of baskets as possible, 2, maybe 3. Then you can prioritize those.
Maybe I can give you one more example, Wanda, because acquisition is a very big thing. We have acquired 10 companies ranging from 10 million to $2 billion. And so we have to make sure that company which you are buying is fits your culture, fits your direction, not just to increase the revenue. So that tells you you're not going to pick those baskets. But applying the 5% rule, typically when you do the acquisitions, you'll say, okay, let's look into that, and CEO will not be involved. And until halfway through the diligence phase, like 50 or so people could be involved. And then they will make the recommendation. The problem at that time is it's very hard to say no to people because they've fallen in love with each other, the two sides. In our company, I get to go for dinner with the other side. We spend half a day talking about culture, fate, what they're going to do. And most of our leaders from acquired companies are still with NetScout after 10 plus years. And so this is the ultimate fail fast strategy, meaning if you're not going to do it, just don't spend the energy. So that I'm applying to the acquisition with the biggest area where we have the 5% rule success delivered at NetScout.
So you're saying even in big bet plays that you have your process and you make a decision quickly. And a decision of, am I really going to do this?
Least number of people. Yeah, with least number of people in the 5%. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. I get it. Now, how do you get that to translate down into the organization?
I think what biggest thing is you have to explain the why of a decision. Normally leaders say, just go and do this. We don't explain why we made the decision. Those people were not in the room when the decision was made. So articulating the decision, it's almost like you're selling them the decision before they start executing. And when people know the why, then they can apply how on their own way. They can use their own brain. They don't need to be, because as long as they solve the problem in the most efficient way, and the problem is defined by the why we are doing this. And I think that that's one thing. Second thing is we empowering them with trust that we are not going to, you're going to do your job because I have done my job in the 5% and explaining what and why. I think creates a different ownership in the team. Otherwise, they're doing the work, but you're still the owner of the problem.
Yeah. And you're trying to get them to own the problem. You've made the decision, which has painted the path that we're going to go down. Now you own.
Empowering people comes with a risk, but it's actually worth it because over time, and you can, in the very early stages, you maybe do less of that, but over time, I usually never worry about the remaining 95%.
That's a remarkable statement for a company of the size of yours. All right. So you explain why to people, why you made this 5% decision, this big decision, and why you decided not to do some other things. You're doing it in a way that sells it, that is identifying now the problem to be solved. How do you deal with resistors at that moment? People who don't like the decision, who are betting someplace else, who think you were wrong. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think those are, that's a good question. It varies. I think what happens is that there are enough people convinced about it that they take care of the rest. Also, we have a very, our tenure, average employee tenure is 20 years. Okay. And so this has not been a problem in the last 10 years. Yes. And 20 years ago, even I was learning, this was the challenge. Company was not sort of as united. And whenever we did a big acquisition, it creates some challenges. And also, just to give you a side example of this is, I talk about in the book that in acquisitions in the industry, earnout is a big thing. Basically, they say, I'm going to pay you $10 million, but if you deliver on your technology, then you'll get $5 million more. That makes the company divided because the main company is trying to do overall revenue $200 million. And the acquired companies has not only helped that, but they have a goal to take their number from 10 to 15. So it just creates this rift between those, and that comes in when you apply the 5% rule could be to take the company to 100 million, whereas the other people have been given a conflicting goal of taking their portion from 10 to 15 million, and they have been going to be incentivized. So it creates a company within a company. So you have to do many of those things, and I talk about avoiding micromanage, meaning we don't watching their work, but you're watching these other things as a leader. And when they come along, you do another meeting to bring that, hey, why this is happening. So you are involved in terms of these kind of challenges you're talking about, but not in managing the execution.
So you're getting the 95% that is the company doing the solution of the problem you're stepping away from if you've made the right 5% decisions. And explained
right
why.
In the beginning.
And at the beginning.
Yeah, right in the beginning. Yeah.
And explained why and got people to understand it. Okay, so
Sorry, one more thing, sorry to interrupt. So I was just remembering one of the decision of Google Map is to not drive, not go at all, or take a train or take Uber. This happens here also. So not going somewhere is deciding not to do the project. So a lot of time there is a disappointment in the team when we decide not to do something. But that disappointment is less when they have not spent any energy on execution.
Right. That's right. That's right. The worst is I got 3/4 of the way and then you pulled the
Yeah,
plug.
why didn't you tell me before? Yeah, why didn't you tell me
Yeah, right.
before?
Why'd I put all that effort in? Unless, of course, there is something really truly to be learned or individuals see that it wasn't going anywhere. I mean, there are some exceptions, but that's not the norm in the organizations that I spend with. All right. I find fascinating this notion about the 5% and the explanation of why you made the decision and what you're really doing. So in many ways, you're saying, look, I'm putting a flagpole out into the future of a thing we're going to try to accomplish. And I'm going to lay down some things we're going to do, but I'm going to lay down a whole bunch of things we're not going to do. So I've created, in effect, a roadmap. Okay. It's not a straight linear road. It's got twists and turns, but you've laid down what the options are within that road and what we're just going to ignore because it's scenery until something goes wrong and we have to regroup. But basically that's it. I believe that is the essential ingredient for getting people to have accountability. Because if I don't buy into that end goal, I don't really understand it. I don't really understand the conditions, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. I don't really understand the timelines. I don't really understand what the problem is. How am I supposed to have any accountability at all? I think there's more to it than that. But what you're saying is this is the step for getting accountability.
And also one of the things very interesting, when I talk to somebody and saying, are you answering their questions or you're solving the problem behind that question? Mm-hmm. But then they have to explain why they're asking this question. They have to explain the why. I find that the people don't have to agree with your decision, but they have to know why you made that decision.
Yeah. It's the other thing I think that most people miss when they're trying to get accountability is that people want to have a voice. Okay. Now a voice doesn't mean I need a vote, but a voice means you hear what it is I'm worried about and you address that, you answer that. That is your explanation of the why. Because without that, I'm just following orders.
Yeah. That's right. And I think then they say something didn't work. Well, I did what you told me. But we didn't ask you to do the work. We asked you to solve the problem based on what I told. So now they have ownership.
Right. So you ask people, are you solving the problem or are you trying to do the work behind the problem? Explain why that's an important distinction.
So we are not telling them that. We are actually explaining it to them at the result after the 5%. This project is going to work like this. And this is why we should do like this. And people get a chance to ask questions and there are other leaders. So if you have a project which spans 4 organizations, in the 5% meeting with me, there is other 4 are present too, representing their groups. So also one of the other interesting thing is that I find typical conflict happen because somebody is talking about the pros of a decision and somebody looking at the cons of the decision. And so they're both right. And so, but they're solving 2 different problems. And so if you are too much worried about cons, then you are risk averse. And when you're looking at only pros, then you are just too bullish about this and you're going to have a black eye later on. So bringing these pros and cons together and driving consensus, not only what we are going to do, why we are going to do, prior to going to the people who are going to implement. So leaderships get aligned. And that's very, very important part because otherwise it shows up. Because when they ask each other's boss, they're going to give a different answer. But now they were in the meeting. They were part of the 5% decision. They all own that decision.
That's an interesting one. So it's not just that you come out and announce we're going to do X, Y, and Z because I have decided. It's you say, here's what we're going to do, here's why we're going to do it. And then you get all the discussion and debate among your top leadership to make sure that they are focused on the same problem, the pros and the cons, not just one side.
Yeah. So there, the 5% is that for a given project, there is a team for 5% team. And depending on the complexity and importance of the project, I may or may not even be there. But then so right now we are doing all this 5% meeting mostly at top level, but it can be done all the way down and on any consequential project, or even if it is two people involved. It's like basically it sounds so trivial, thinking before doing.
It's easy to say those things and very difficult to do. As you said, deciding what not to do sounds so simple to say, but it's really complicated, I think, in the process. All right. So priorities. I get that you make the prioritization easy because you've now eliminated a whole bunch of stuff that you're not going to do. So we got some clarity of what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it. But I still am going to have 3 or 4 things, maybe just 3 that I'm going to need to do in there. How do I know which one is top priority? How do I know where to put my real energy?
Yeah, I think overall it's a difficult question in terms of, I mean, normally when you have very few things to do, I think they're all equally important. So I try not to prioritize them because without doing all 2 or 3 things, I will not be able to be successful with the project. So they could be number one priority across 3 dimensions, and all dimensions of a square are important. So make sure the success doesn't escape the square. So you can think of priority as really top priority in each dimension. Like, for example, you don't want to increase top line at the expense of bottom line. Okay. And a lot of time we look at revenue growth at the expense of revenue growth at the expense of other issues like marketing and the value system and things like that. So I think maybe if you have a project X that results in 3 projects, now you could have 3 projects, and then you may have to worry about the priorities, but not within the 5%. So then there is yet another decision. Yeah, there is a marketing project, sales project. So yeah, I think we're not within the 5%, 3 important items, but within multiple 5% projects.
Right.
Yeah, I think that comes with what are the business goals and things like that. And sometimes board is also involved and external influence is there. The challenges you are facing, and based on that, we decide.
So you basically said, I have one priority, which has multiple dimensions to it, each of which have to be done in order to succeed. But what I've really done is made the main decision about what we're doing and pulled off the table what we're not doing. And that you cascade that through the organization so that whenever there's a big thing going, there's always a 5% meeting, whatever it is at that level, to get the individuals leading it aligned so they can communicate with the teams who are going to execute why. What and why.
I want to make, that's right. And I want to mention that there are approximately 100 projects in NetScout which deserve the 5%. The 5% meeting is just one meeting. Sometimes it's 4 to 8 meetings. Sometimes there are one person, and sometimes there are 10 people involved. So I didn't mean to say that for simple things are not consequential. And right now I'm running something called a 5% audit in the company. We are reviewing all the decisions which were made on the last 10 years. And saying, why did we make them? Document them for the next generation. And so we are going a different phase of NetScout. And so that's even more important. And I feel this is the biggest thing we could do for the next generation leadership.
I like the idea that you have the language within the company and everybody understands that there's a bit of a process to get a decision made and to ensure that there's at least some alignment around the key players in that decision. Sounds like already a major step ahead compared to what I see in lots of places. All right, now I want to come back on something you said earlier, which was about objectives. You also said this in terms of stock, that there's only one class of stock, but it's the objectives I want to come back to. that you said when you acquire a company, there's often competing objectives. One group is trying to maximize the revenue in their particular spot and grow it by 50%, but the whole company has a different revenue target, and that sets up competing objectives. So the statement, I have to say, comes from Phil Hodgson years ago. But the notion that management by objectives is going to inevitably kill the company culture, because so long as I have my own individual objective, that means that I just have to work 10%, 20% harder on my thing and ignore whatever else is going on out there in order to get the greatest return. And I think you just said you agree with Phil and that we need a company objective, not a whole bunch of individuals. Yes?
That's why we don't do earnout. That's not allowed. We never do earnouts in acquisition. Also, we look at the true intellectual properties are the employees. So we expect all the acquired leaders to stay at NetScout, which is not the goal. Okay. Or on day one, if it is redundant, before even the acquisition is closed, people know who is not going to stay. And so 50% of our employees, leaders, not employees, are from acquired companies. And many of them were fierce competitors of NetScout prior to this.
Hey, you got a company that lets you get on and do things and tries not to get in the way, that creates some alignment, and that's growing. It's a pretty good principle. I think most people will stick around on that one. All right. Talk to me a little bit about transparency. I know this is one of the core principles. Transparency and trust are two of the core principles that you believe are essential to get this 5% practice. So talk to me about transparency. Why does that matter and how do you get it done?
So let me give a quick answer, but it's part of the bigger theme. So 5% rule combined with the value system is what delivers the success. Okay, so transparency is one of the attributes of the value system. So a lot of people are saying we need to be transparent, but I look at transparency as the outcome of something else you do, not the goal. Okay, the goal is fairness. Okay? If you are fair to everyone, you have nothing to hide, and you'll be transparent. So, as an example, NetScout, everyone is eligible for RSUs, restricted stock unit. Everyone is in the same bonus calculation plan, meaning the formula for accruing the bonus is exactly same for me and everyone else in the company. Okay, as a result, I can be very transparent about it. And I can do a single company call and explain the virtues of our compensation philosophy. And look at, Wanda, how simple it is. So now the outcome is transparency. But actually it was driven by fairness, having one class of stock. But look at how efficient and simple this is. I can do a single call for the entire company in 1 hour and explain everything versus 5 different calls, 5 different things. You don't even know who you are sharing with what. So when you have fairness, not only you achieve transparency, you achieve simplicity, you achieve efficiency, you achieve everything. Now that when you combine with the trust, that I'm going to trust with people who are here, otherwise why are they here? And it creates what I call the lean but not mean philosophy, which is 5% deliver the lean decision making, efficient decision making, which actually makes you not mean. You don't need to do layoff, you don't have to cut cost. And actually lean and mean should be not lean and mean, because the mistakes are being covered by being mean. Nobody wants to be mean, okay? And so that's basically the two the cornerstones. The 5% rule, which is the management technique I've learned to be very efficient, and other is a value system. Employee first, happy employees deliver happy customer, and happy customer drive revenue and deliver happy shareholders. Usually you start with shareholders and so this is these two things is what really the success. There have been a lot of ups and downs. We are going through one right now, But this has not changed. The value system has stayed same from day one.
Okay. All right. So we have a value system that says we want transparency, but transparency is outcome of being fairness. So we're going to be fair. That makes it easy to be transparent. We have a value system that we're trusting employees. We have a value system that says employees first, because happy employees will make happy customers. Happy customers will drive your stakeholder value or shareholder value. Did I get that right? Those are all our values? Okay. Trust, Anil, is so easy to say and extremely difficult to do. So how do you make it live in your company?
So first thing is trust is between two parties, okay? And I think the bigger party has to make the first move. So company is bigger than the employees. And we establish trust during interview, especially for leader. And then I say trust multiplies over time. If you start with zero trust, it takes infinite time to drive trust. And some people say, well, suppose you trust somebody for 10 things. What if you're wrong? Well, you can always multiply by 0.1, 0.2 and bring it down to zero. But 95% of the time, people, you trust them, they'll end up trusting you. But somebody has to make the first move. So I think trust is like it's another part of fairness and efficiency. Because if you don't trust then why are they here? Why did you hire them? And so I think I look at it, trust meaning that I trust you as a person, even if I don't trust your decisions. It's very interesting because a lot of time people look at trust as it'll take time for you to trust somebody's decision, but do you trust that person as a person that they purposely will not do something wrong? Okay. Is the trust.
Have you ever had that been proven to be a false, like you were a mistake to trust somebody?
Yeah, I think it does happen. Like I said, maybe 3-4 incidents in 40 years. That's not a bad record.
That's not a bad record. All right. So you must have a good sense of how to find people that you're going to trust, or else you're right that when you trust people, they tend to behave graciously, honorably, is the word I'm looking for.
And a lot of people have bad experience in other places. So they stop trusting. They wanted to be like us, but they had bad experiences. So over time, people have changed when they were here.
I can see that one too. And I've certainly seen it go the other direction. So you say that the bigger party has to make the first move on trust. And I say the same thing, but for a different analysis, because I say every leader wants their team to trust them. But no team member is going to trust you as a leader if you don't trust the team member. If you just think about it, it isn't going to go from the smallest to the largest. It can't work that way.
That's right. And that's why I think, the one leader there are 10 people reporting to that person. So that's all the more important.
All the more important. Okay. All right. So, and you focus on, do I trust you as a person? Even if it's going to take time to trust your decisions.
Even if I don't trust, even if it'll take time for me to trust your decision. Sometimes I tell people say, I say, I don't like this decision. He said, don't you trust me? I say, if I don't trust you, I won't be even talking to you. Okay. And so I'm listening to you means I trust you. Doesn't mean I agree with it.
Well, that's another one that we need to, as you said before, a healthy debate that brings together two different perspectives like pros and cons is what's going to give you for winning formula. But that getting that healthy debate says, I don't agree with you, or I don't like that decision, or it doesn't make sense to me. And then we talk about it. It doesn't mean I'm going to trust you blindly and never have any doubts.
And also, I think a lot of people confuse the style. You don't have to like somebody's style, and you can still trust them. And so once you start trusting, you are able to separate the style of a person or habits of a person from their other behavior. And so I think over time, people get to learn to work with each other, and it's not a trust issue. It may be a style issue.
So describe to me how you do this. Just pick a person that you've said has a very different style than yours, different communication, different whatever, all sorts of different styles and habits that you don't like those habits. But how do you come to trust them?
I think basically if the habits are not creating other bad consequences, and then you just say, hey, that's the style. I mean, you have been with your between husband wife with your kids, and so you must be liking something about them to be able to ignore something else. And so it could be that they're very good in something. So style is, I think, to me, is not. I mean, it's not. Style doesn't mean that they are abusive to other people or doing bad language. Style means they have a different way of solving the problem. As long as they can solve the problem, achieve the objectives the right way, they can find their own way of implementing it. And so over time, they also learn that somebody else's style is actually delivering faster result, and they start sort of used to. I mean, start changing their style.
Great. Great. All right. I love this principle because I love the articulation of some very basic principles that I think are really useful for our managers. Whether your CEO is doing it or not, you can still adopt it. So this 5%, focus on the 5% decisions that are really truly going to deliver the greatest impact. And that means mostly focusing on what you're not doing, an important lesson. And then live by a set of values that are going to then make it possible for people around you and underneath you to really execute on that decision. And we start with absolute total fairness, which makes transparency possible. And then we go to trust. I'm going to trust you to get this. I'm going to trust you as a person. Even if I don't trust your decisions, we're going to have to debate some of these decisions. Okay, fine, but I'll trust you. And even if you have a different style than mine, I'm going to trust you as a person. And then that means I have happy employees. Happy employees are going to make happy customers. Happy customers are going to drive shareholder return. We've got the simple formula.
And that is trusting somebody, I think, is the biggest empowerment you can give to somebody. It's not about decisions. It's about saying, I trust you. Even if you make a mistake, it's not because you violated my trust. You may have made a mistake because of various reasons. You have lack of experience, and you can learn. And then people feeling that level of trust with your management, I think, deliver this. Also, I want to maybe mention one thing, just a plug into your topic about getting out of your comfort zone. I was just thinking this morning as I was thinking about that I think getting out of your comfort zone, you said, is difficult for people. Okay, and I think doing 5% rule actually is getting out of your comfort zone. But one thing I want to tell to your audience is it's not difficult once you get past it. Actually, it's very liberating, because just imagine you don't have to worry about it, but at the same time you're getting out of your comfort zone, that you don't micromanage, because will that work or will that? Well, 5% rule sort of assures you. I mean, aren't you leaving it to, it's like the Google map, the god, we call it Google uncle, to drive you wherever you say, I'm getting stuck, will I still reach on time? But path has been chosen through twists and turns, and 95% of the time we reach on time. And I've noticed the people who are expert drivers, like I have people, the limo drivers who are like really good, who know in Boston area everything. They refuse to look at Google Map.
Because they try.
They find it insulting sometimes. Okay? So why do I have to do it? I know, and then many times they are late. Those experts.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think you're right. The out of the comfort zone move in our conversation this morning is trusting that the 5% is what you need to focus on, and that the rest will be okay if I create transparency and trust. But without that, then it's not necessarily going to work.
And then you're delivering your full value. And like I said, it's really liberating for a person. It's when you say difficult to get out of comfort zone, it sounds like counterintuitive that it could be liberating.
I think there are an awful lot of people out there overloaded in their tasks that if they applied the 5% rule to could create a great deal of levity in their lives. All right, Anil, it's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you for joining us today. I remind everybody, Anil Singhal, the book is called The 5% Rule of Leadership. So Anil, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice talking to you.